and intro. Hello, one and all, and welcome to the weekly armchair kickoff. And we are talking the Liverpool preview, and there'll be a bit of a debate, but we'll get into that later on. My name is Darragh, and I'm delighted to be hosting again, and I'm also delighted to be joined by Keane, our main man himself, and former Manchester United player for the Marsh. Lads, how are you getting on?
Oh, good lad. Yeah, not bad. Thank you, mate. Good. Looking forward to the game. I think obviously Man games have often notorious for pulling strings to happen. Obviously, we've been on the receiving end of a few hidings in recent years, but quietly confident that we can get a result this time around.
And we can only hope. Keane, how are you, man?
Grand, good to be here. It's actually grand to be on the other side of the fucking the chair tonight on as a guest rather than as a host. So yeah, all good. Glad to be here. Probably won't be saying that at 6 o'clock Sunday. But nevertheless, I'm happy to chat about the biggest game in English football. Because look, one thing I will say is Manchester City can financially dope all they want, but they'll never have a rivalry like this one. So the two proper rich clubs in England, regardless how much money they have, this is a proper rivalry, proper fan bases, and look, whatever you say about the hatred between these two clubs, there's respect there as of what both of these clubs have achieved, and never mind Manchester City. This is the proper rivalry in English football.
Now, lads, this is where we have to be the unfortunate side. We are unfortunately joined by two Liverpool fans. Joining us tonight, we have Keith and Adam. Lads, how are you tonight?
Good, yeah, good. Looking forward to the chat. As Keane touched on there, and I agree. I think the biggest clubs in England are Liverpool and Manchester United, without a doubt, followed by Arsenal, and some of the other clubs are, new money, the Beverly Hillbillies and all that sort of stuff that come into the game late. But when it comes to big clubs, this is the one. And when you get a FA Cup quarter final at Old Trafford with Liverpool and Man United, it's despite the fortunes of either club at any given time, I think it's always a big game to be looking forward to. So yeah, looking forward to having a chat about it. I'm quietly confident for the result as well.
That's a fair point to make. Adam, man, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I think again, just probably mirroring what the other lads have said. I'm always quite happy to come and do stuff with the United fans because, as Keane said before, like that there's that level of respect, regardless of like the hatred between the two clubs and the fan bases. There's always that the success of the clubs and the history of the clubs is built on, I don't want to say it is built without cheating because, there are only charges over Man City at the minute. We don't want to go accusing them too much. But ultimately, yeah, like mirroring like what you said before, two biggest clubs in England. And, as much as I hate to admit it, I do respect how United have gained a lot of their success.
And I think that's a good way to start. And like we talk about the rich history between the two clubs and the rivalry, most importantly, between the two. So I think that's where we're going to kick off because, I mean, we're all different generations, roughly the same age, but to a degree different generations. And with different generations, there's a different meaning to the rivalry itself. So we're going to kick off tonight by saying, what does the rivalry mean to you personally as a fan? And I'm going to give it to the Liverpool boys first. So Keith, Adam, whichever one of you want to kick off first on that one.
Adam, do you want to take that?
Yeah, well, do you know what? It's a weird. I'll start off with a bit of a bombshell. So my dad's actually a Man United fan. So for me, it's always been a bit of a household rivalry as well. I think like sort of when I was growing, I can't really remember the exact age I became a Liverpool fan, but it sort of came from more watching England games with my dad and my granddad, and me sort of having that love for Gerrard and sort of following him through to club level. Just when I was a young boy. my dad's like I said, a massive Man United fan, and I remember he tried in the early days to sort of bring me over, and it would have been very easy because you guys were winning like absolutely everything at the time of me growing up. It would have been so easy for me to become a Man United fan and sort of follow my dad's footsteps. But yeah, I think for me it was more like the love for Gerrard that sort of took me to Liverpool, and then from then. It just became like this sort of household rivalry. So for me, when I think of Liverpool United, I think of like me when I'm younger, like sort of against my dad, sat with my dad, or like we've been to the odd Man United Liverpool game as well. So it's always just had that sort of family connection, which has been really good. And then also typically people my age, I'm 25. So like I said before, I grew up around all of United's success under Fergie, which was a horrible time to be a kid. So a lot of my friends are naturally Man United fans. And so there's just always been that sort of, like I said, whether it be with my dad or some of my best friends, has always just been that like Liverpool United, like let's have it sort of thing. So I've sort of just grew up around the rivalry, really. So it's it's brilliant.
Yeah.
Great fights. Keith, what about you, man?
Yeah, I'm from my man and dad about big Liverpool fans. So I grew up in a Liverpool supporting family, and they're quite passionate about it. But being from Ireland and Dublin, I think it's Manchester United or it's Liverpool, and that's the way a lot of in Ireland, I'd say a lot of areas are. There's the odd sprinkling of Everton and Tottenham and Aston Villa, and other big clubs from back in the day that you'd have a few fans, but it's predominantly Liverpool, Manchester United. And yeah, I'm from a Liverpool family. Some family members are big Manchester United fans as well. And I suppose the proximity, Dublin to Liverpool, it's not that far. It's a nice little hop over the two port cities. It's just there's an affiliation or I don't know, kindred spirits with Dublin and Liverpool, I think. And it's just a team that I've always loved. And as I said, my mum, my dad, my sisters, my brother, like we're all big Liverpool fans, and that's sort of gone into our children as well. So it just handed down to you, doesn't it? And you get the bug early on, and it's hard to shake. So yeah, I just love Liverpool. I love the people of Liverpool. I love the football team, and I grew up in the 80s. Liverpool were quite dominant. Manchester United were quite poor. But then you reach your teenage years and it flips. And you've got Manchester United in the 90s dominating everything. And that was a tough period. A lot of Manchester United fans, as I said, in Dublin. So, yeah, it's a, my love for Liverpool, even when we're bad, you always give them a chance. And I'm sure it's the same for you guys on the other side. But it's a rivalry again that form goes out the window with them. I've seen plenty of poor Liverpool teams go and get wins in Old Trafford. So, we might have been, I'd say we've been the cock of the walk for the last few years. A change of fortunes is only ever around the corner, isn't it?
It can be. And I share an opposite sentiment to Adam, where, well, my dad, personally, was never big into football. He was more into more sports, Formula One, that kind of thing. But myself and my brother always at each other's throats. He was a Liverpool fan. I was a United fan. It was actually my uncle who got me into Manchester United, because kind of like in the same way Adam, Dad nearly got him to become a United fan. My brother nearly got me to become a Liverpool fan. So it's funny how things work out that way. And of course, my brother was jealous of me looking at all the success growing up with the Fergie era and everything, but I knew time would come eventually on it, and I said, I remember saying it when I was younger. It was a moment of, well, it's going to happen eventually, so I may as well embrace myself and be ready for it. And sure enough, my brother only said it, was it back in 2016, 2017? He goes, "Now you know how it felt all my years of you growing up watching Fergie." So it's just a shared sentiment of, look, once you respect the two teams and their history, it goes a massive way, really. So we've heard from the Liverpool boys. Keane, what's the rivalry mean to you, really?
Do you know when the fixture list comes out? Like every June, whether it's before the World Cup or before the Euros, or before the pre-season starts, the first fixture you look for is Liverpool, regardless of what, like Keith said, regardless of what form we're in or what state we might be in. It's the first game you look for at the start of the season. I grew up in like, funnily enough, I was named after Roy Keane. Obviously, and like I actually grew up in a house full of Scousers. So every time Liverpool United was on, I used to get a grueling. They used to love winding me up, and yeah, sometimes we'd come out on top, and then other days you'd have like the Danny Murphy free kick. So or on my confirmation day, on my confirmation day, the 4-1 at Old Trafford. I'll never forget that one. Confirmation day, collecting all my hundreds, but then also getting absolutely ridiculed in the house.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. But yeah, this rivalry, I think, like, look, at the end of the day, it means a lot because, like, if you win, you're buzzing, but if you lose, it takes a few days to get over it, because it's the team, obviously, that our biggest rivals, like, especially here in Ireland, like, it's United or Liverpool, and if you go into the workplace, there's Liverpool fans in there giving it, or if we win, I'm giving it, so, like, there's so many different elements to this rivalry. And I think just as well, like, I think the history of both clubs, like, it's massive, and like you look at how successful both of these teams have been, and kind of how they've kind of epitomized English football and put it on the map. Really, if you look through the 80s, yeah, nice one, Trevor. When you look at Liverpool in the 80s, obviously winning the European Cups, and then like you look at United then in the 90s winning the treble, and stuff like that. Them big moments where, like, you look at these two clubs, they've kind of really epitomize what English football really means. And I think when you look at it, it's just a rivalry that I don't think it can be matched. And you can look at El Clasico, which is a good rivalry. You look at the North London derby, the Milan derby. I look at this one, I do think, like, you look at viewership numbers every year, you look at the atmosphere between both clubs, it just form most of the time goes out the window, and hopefully that's the case Sunday. But yeah, look, I love the fixture, but I also hate it every season, and I'd say Sunday might be no different, to be honest with you.
Well, don't be too negative just yet, Keane. Now, Phil, you've been there, man. You know what it's like being in the club itself. What does it mean to the players themselves inside the club, as well as just being a fan of the club?
Yeah, I think it's massive. As I said, then I was lucky enough to sort of be at the club from a young age. Just before I do start that, we've got a bit of a trend going on here, because being in St Helens, which, just for context, is sort of slap bang in the middle of Manchester and Liverpool. I also had a bit of a mixed family in terms of supporting Liverpool and stuff like that. So growing up, I was sort of, watching all the football and didn't really sort of support a team, if you like. But because I got picked up so early at United, it was sort of, it was just written in the stars, really, that was going to be the sort of way I went. But yeah, just getting back to sort of the playing side of things, I think the Liverpool matches were always the big ones, and being at a club like Manchester United, the standards, the history was drilled into you from the get-go. The club was always sort of giving you that information, because they wanted the young players to understand what it was to play for Manchester United, and how lucky and fortunate you was to be in that position. But yeah, especially the Liverpool games. I remember, even the coaches were even pumped up for them games. They wanted to have the bragging rights. They wanted to get the, win just as much as the players. And I think that particular fixture was always one that we sort of looked forward to, because it was always a massive game, and one that you sort of wanted to come away with a win. And I think that sort of epitomised where both clubs were, and obviously the history that the clubs have got. And I think, again, we've talked about it from the start of the show. Obviously, the two clubs that have sort of been the most successful, they've done things in the right way. And for me, again, it's definitely the biggest game for me in world football, just based on the success that both clubs have had and the history and all that. So yeah, it was always massive. And as I say, I was lucky enough to sort of play at academy level, into the youth team, reserve team level, and then obviously in the first team. As I say, I was lucky enough to be at the club when Manchester United were dominating and being successful, and I was lucky enough to sort of be in and around some of them players and learn from the best and sort of really truly understand what it was to be a top professional, because them players were relentless. Obviously Fergie had a massive part in that, but the standard of the club when I was there in terms of the way it was ran from top to bottom, it was just a well-oiled machine. And I think it's unfortunate and sort of sad to see how the club has sort of gone a little bit downhill, let's say, in the last sort of 10, 15 years from obviously when Ferguson was leaving. But I think the club can look forward to now with the new takeover news, and hopefully it's a start of a new era to come.
Yeah, no, I was actually going to make the point there. The fact that you came up through the academy, was this game seen as big as, let's say, the senior level, or will it be seen, or would it be seen as just any other game? But is there as much of an emphasis at the lower levels compared to as you're going up the ranks into the senior level, if you get what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think that particular game was always sort of looked at and sort of pinpointed, and when we played Liverpool, it was always a really good game. We always had a good test, but at the end of the day, it was no different. You just wanted to come away and win the match. But I think from a coaching point of view as well, as I said, the coaches, you could see it in there. The way they sort of approached the game, it was always the biggest game for them, because they wanted to always get one over on each other because of obviously that rivalry that stemmed a long time ago, and obviously with the success. But yeah, it was always massive. It always will be. I think no matter what happens with both clubs, every club has a dip in form. Every club has cycles where they're successful, and then that sort of makes its way around again at some point. And I think at the moment, Liverpool, in this last 5-10 years, have been in the moment where obviously City's been an absolute thorn in their side. They would have won a lot more titles if it hadn't been for what City have done and stuff. But I think they have been absolutely fantastic in this last period of time, where any other time they would have won a lot more. So thankfully for us, we're not that far behind in terms of titles. And I think now it's the start of hopefully United coming back to make a bit of a dent in that and try and bridge that gap, so we can at least be challenging in the next 3-4 years.
And I like how you say that we're actually not that far away, because in reality, we're showing glimmers of, okay, we can actually properly contend, but there's not going to be anything set in stone, because there's just that so much of an inconsistency, really. I suppose that's the best way to move on to our next topic. And we're going to have a bit of fun here, lads. Some player debate. And I think, given how he made the headlines for the Carabao Cup final, I think this is the most appropriate one to start with. We're going to start with Virgil van Dijk or Rio Ferdinand. No. I'm still adamant, when you look at who each player came up against, let's say in terms of the strikers that each centre-back came up against, in my opinion, it's a no-brainer, but we'll leave that to the contributors. So we'll start with yourself, Keane.
Look, to be fair, both centre-backs, I think, are top. Like, if you look at the modern game, I think, first of all, I want to say Virgil van Dijk, if you look at the way he transformed Liverpool and he went in when they had like the Skirtle and Daniel Agger, and then who were decent, but they weren't world level in terms of like top of the food chain. And then Van Dijk went in there and he single-handedly transformed that Liverpool back four. And ultimately, got him fighting at the top table. Ultimately won Liverpool league. I think like, only for the injury, I do think he'd be undisputedly, if he stayed on and get that injury and had that little bit of a dip for a couple of months, that kind of year or so, I think he'd be undisputedly number one, for that period. But I look at Rio, I look at the way he transformed United after Jaap Stam left. We similarly when Liverpool lost Van Dijk, So they lost a good centre half, and they lost someone who transformed their back four. Like we lost Stam, and then Rio came in. He was kind of the modern day centre half that we see now in terms of bringing the ball out from the back. Quick pace. He can pass. He can do. Obviously, he's a good defensive player as well. I just think his consistency over a matter of years and back to back, titles and doing it on the internet. Well, I wouldn't say doing it on the international stage because England didn't win at him. In that stage, you can't really count that. But I will say, like, the fact that he done it back to back years in Europe and in the league for United and winning titles, I'd maybe give him the edge there. But what I will say is, if you look at these two centre halves, they have very good skill sets in terms of their pace, in terms of how they read the game, in terms of staying consistent for a number of years. And I do think, like, if you look at Rio specifically, do you see how Pep uses John Stones and kind of how he brings the ball out from the back and can play in midfield? In this game, could he do that role? Maybe, potentially. Van Dijk could probably do that role as well. But I do think Rio has the edge just over the period of time because he done it with Leeds and West Ham in the league as well. But that's not to say Virgil van Dijk isn't anywhere near him, because he's top 3 for me in the league. I think John Terry is above the two of them. In my opinion, I think John Terry is above the two lads. But I do think Rio and Van Dijk will be a close second and third.
Interesting, because it's not even because he plays for Liverpool. I just think because bar Harry Keane in the last couple of years, there's not been the out and out strikers, the iconic strikers, shall we say, that have come up against Virgil van Dijk. And even in the style of how teams go forward these days, because there's this statistic about Virgil van Dijk not being dribbled past for X amount of games, where in reality, how it is, in my opinion anyway, because there's a certain, if someone correct me here, is there a certain definition as to how it means to be dribbled past in order to go, as in, say you've dribbled past a ball, whereas you could literally have a player bomb down the wing and that could be technically considered it, but
sorry, just to jump in, you are right in that sense. I think that sort of more comes from the idea, though, that Virgil is one of the centre backs, and sorry, I'll get onto this. I think this is why in picking Rio to compare Van Dijk to, it's a really good comparison. I've seen a lot of the comparisons sort of in recent times be more about Vidic, like is it Van Dijk or is it Vidic? For me, this is just speaking as someone who is our personal preference. I think Van Dijk is a much better centre back than Vidic, purely because Vidic was brilliant at what he did, but he was very sort of rash. He like jumping into tackles. Van Dijk, he's always, okay, how do I put this? He never really had to do that. He's always sort of 2, 3, even 4 steps ahead of everybody else. He reads the game so unbelievably well. And I think that's where that stat comes from. Not necessarily not because people can't beat him. It's just because instead of jumping into a tackle, he'll take 2 or 3 steps further back, give himself a second or two to just read what they're going to do and almost stop it before it becomes too dangerous. And I think that's one of the things that obviously doesn't really get spoken about enough, but that's something that is probably one of the biggest areas of Virgil van Dijk's game. And I think because, like, traditionally, look, in England, we're very big on the typical, like, big, broody centre-back that'll go flying into challenges and, make these heroic last-ditch tackles. And Vidic was brilliant at that, which is, I think, why he gets put on a bit more of a pedestal. But, yeah, for me, I think with Van Dijk, look, just to go into the Rio debate, Rio was a bit of a pioneer. You guys have sort of already alluded to the fact that as he was coming up, his ability on the ball to bring the ball forward out from defence, I can't really think of another centre-back around that time that was doing that. And I think that's why he was probably so vital. And for me, arguably, he is that guy that would, you maybe say Man United's best ever centre-back. I don't know what your guys' opinion on that one is. I think the only thing that separates Van Dijk and Rio for me, because again, look, they're both quick. They both ability to read the game incredibly good. I think the only thing that separates them for me is you could just say that Virgil van Dijk probably has that little bit more physical and aerial presence about himself, and that little bit more like leadership. Like, I don't know, I feel like Rio almost always sort of felt like a bit of a number 2 as opposed to like the main guy. Like, correct me if I'm wrong there. I could be speaking out of line there. Whereas Virgil van Dijk sort of is that guy, he's that leader. He brings that sort of physical dominance. Obviously, adding a lot of goals as well.
Of course,
So I think for me, like, the comparison is really fair and it's a really good one to have. And I probably lean closer to the line of what Keane was saying, where you can almost sort of pick and choose between the two. But I think for me, there's just those couple of things that Van Dijk possesses more sort of in that physical area that Rio maybe lacked. And I think as well, like with Rio, I mentioned before, he was really quick. Once Rio's legs started to go a little bit, you sort of saw that steady decline. Now, obviously, we've not got to a point with Van Dijk yet where his legs have really started to go, so we don't know that yet. But all I will say, just as my prediction on that, is that that's where he can sort of manage his career maybe a little bit better, just in the sense of, you always talk about Van Dijk, and I mentioned it before. Look, you never really see him sprint. Like, he's really quick, but you never really see him sprint. And often that's because he is so far ahead of everybody else in terms of like just being able to read the game, knowing what's going to happen. And I think for his ability to be that good, where he doesn't really ever need to use his legs, to use the sprint, as I said before, I think he'll just maybe manage his career a little bit better and go on for that little bit longer at the highest level. And
actually, you basically kind of covered the point I was going to make, because I just saw it in the comments. AJ brings in the point from earlier. Van Dijk versus Rio is actually a very good comparison to make. Both very elegant, don't dive into challenges so much. And Rio started, as you made the point there, Adam, about losing. He only started to dive into challenges more because he lost that edge and speed. And it's a great point to make, because I love seeing, like, as a United fan, you love seeing statistics that will make one player look worse than the other, especially in the Van Dijk and Vidic situation. But in reality, when you break down how they actually work, they are two different defenders in reality. Like, so, as you made the point, Vidic was more, he would have been an ideal, like, even as an Irishman, I say this, because the point you make there, as the coin, or the term is now coined, Brexit tackles, he would be straight in there trying the kitchen sink and everything. That's the typical kind of centre back that you want, but you also have to have a game smart someone like Rio, someone like Vidic, and that's why it's probably a better comparison to make compared to, no, you look at each individual. Now, obviously, Keane made a great point there as well earlier about the fact that, was it Keane or Phil? Sorry, that made the point that basically because of City's dominance, that Liverpool team didn't get the credit they deserve. And I'll even say that as a United fan, because as a football fan, hands down, that Liverpool team, on paper, in my opinion, is better than the City team that kept edging them each time, because somehow each time, even when Aguero was on the decline, they still found a way to edge a goal or two. And Liverpool had the dominance in that front three. Like, that front three you could go on about for days, because for someone who doesn't seem like he was as effective in Bobby Firmino, you had a fantastic number 9, kind of playing a false 9, even, would you nearly say, really. And
that front three reminds me of, though, the Firmino, Mane, and Salah one. You can draw comparisons to Rooney, Ronaldo, Tevez, because you look at them three players and three partnerships, both partnerships. Firmino done what Tevez used to do. He done the dirty work. He was creative. Then Mane was kind of the Rooney, though, the grafter in there, so really direct, pacey, take players on. Then Salah was like Ronaldo, the goal scorer. They all, like, both front threes had their roles, and they're like, when you look at like classic Premier League front threes, them two draw a comparison, don't they? Like, look, when you look at Liverpool's run to the Champions League in 2019 and the title in 2020, like, I think that front three is very instrumental. I think Firmino, in many regards, I think in that front three most definitely is underrated. But he didn't score as many goals, say, Salah and Mane, but the dirty work he used to do in there, and like the way he drop in, and then Salah and Mane and make them kind of inverted runs, inside. Like, he done great work there. So I think, like, he probably doesn't get, like, probably from rival fans, doesn't get the respect probably than that Salah and Mane would get. But So I think equally, and Phil probably as a striker can probably attest to it. You know, his work rate was probably integral in how that front three worked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
No.
I was going to make the point. Sorry, if Phil or Keith want to add any extra points to what Adam and Keane had already made there.
Oh yeah. Look, I'll jump in very quickly. AJ put in the comments that Keith looks like he'd rather be anywhere else. Not at all. I enjoy coming on. I've done stuff with Keane before. Not at all. Happy to be here. Look, this is a debate about opinions, and Manchester United fans will always side for Rio Ferdinand, and Liverpool fans will side for Virgil van Dijk. I think Virgil van Dijk's the best centre half that's ever played in the Premier League. I think he's better than all of them because I think his skill set is better than all of them. There's no one part of Rio's game that's better than Van Dijk, in my opinion, and you will disagree. That's fine. No problems with that. And it's very hard to compare eras here as well, by the way. So if I say, if Virgil van Dijk, this version of Virgil van Dijk dropped into the Manchester United team when Rio Ferdinand signed, would Manchester United have won the same amount of league titles, less or more? I think, more, possibly. Rio Ferdinand into the Liverpool team when Van Dijk signed, I don't think that is good, right? Because Virgil van Dijk did, I hate saying that, single-handedly transform Liverpool, but the Liverpool defence, right, before that, you were looking at Dejan Lovren, Mamadou Sakho, Joe Gomez was still in and around there. It wasn't an elite defence. Van Dijk came in the January and like that transformed it. Like literally a transformation like you've never seen before. Alisson comes in then in the summer and that's a huge upgrade. Obviously we had Mignolet and the fella Loris Karius, I forget his name all the time.
Oh, that man.
Yeah, he who shall not be named. But they had that keeper, so Van Dijk came in and was one of the most important signings. I just think Van Dijk's leadership and his skill set, the dribbled pass thing, it's a bit of a silly stat, but the point always remained, players avoided him. Every attack in the Liverpool team was centred, and I'm not talking about Trent here as a weakness, but everything went to the right side because Van Dijk and Robertson on the left had it locked down. Nobody was going near them at the peak of their powers. I just think for me, I think it's, it's the most obvious answer in of all the debates we're going to have. And I think a few of them are actually quite obvious. But this one for me, I don't think Rio is anywhere near as good as Virgil van Dijk. And that's not to say that I'm dissing Rio, because we're going to do it all-time 11s later on. And he will feature in mine, spoiler alert. I just think Van Dijk is so good at everything. He doesn't have a weakness. Whereas I think Rio had I think Vidic had loads of weaknesses. I think he was carried. He's more of a Carragher comparison for me than Vidic. I wouldn't put him anywhere near it personally. But then it's opinions. It's a Liverpool fan's opinion. It's probably blinkered and it's probably biased. But I just think Van Dijk is. I think Van Dijk is the best centre back. I think he's the skill set of all of the good centre backs previously. He has it all. I don't think there's been a centre back that's had as much as Van Dijk. That's my opinion.
I think that is probably just the bottom line on Van Dijk. Like, I think that's why he is rated so highly, because you couldn't really pick a flaw in his game. Like, if I was to ask you the question, like, what does Van Dijk not have that he needs to have to be that next level? Like, could you tell me anything? Like, it doesn't really feel like there's anything lacking in his game. I think that's like the sort of the bottom line there.
And like, I'll just make the point here, and I genuinely think this is why, like as a football fan, take away the club bias. Really, I genuinely feel because of the fact that, as I previously mentioned, City kept pipping Liverpool to the post in terms of the league. If it wasn't for that, Van Dijk would be quite easily talked about higher than higher than Adams, Terry, Rio, Vidic. I think genuinely, there will be a debate as to whether we're even having to mention these names, because Van Dijk, in his own terms, is a good defender. But it's just that debate. Like, I genuinely feel if it wasn't for the fact that City kept cheating, financially doping, whatever way you want to call it, I genuinely think people would recognise Virgil van Dijk as a better centre back, and like that's just my opinion.
I get what you're saying. I think people often weigh in the title debate, don't they? Sort of said like, oh, he's only won one Premier League title. I just think the frustrating thing about that is just when it comes down to talking about individual players. You know, like for example, like I could make the argument if you're talking about best English midfielders of all time, I could go Calvin Phillips has won a treble. Like what?
Yeah,
like, do you know what I mean?
exactly.
Like it's sort of a it's a good thing to have. Yeah, the fact that Rio has won. I honestly don't even know how many Premier League titles he's won, but a lot of Premier League titles. Van Dijk's only got the one, so I get it. It sort of it ticks a box, but for me that can't be, and it can't be the bottom line. But I know it is for a lot of fans.
And even Reese makes the point here. Van Dijk is Liverpool's best centre back since Sami Hyypiä. If I'm being unbiased here in this Premier League, he's top 3, but to compare it to past years, it's pointless. And it's a point to make about the fact that eras fit certain players, because even if you go back 10 years ago, the pace of play was a lot slower compared to now. So
you weren't defending on the halfway line. Do you know what I mean? Centre backs were defending the edge of the box. Now that they're having to stand on the halfway line, and they have to have the pace, which, by the way, Rio Ferdinand would have been no problem. You know, the modern game, Rio Ferdinand would fit into it without a shadow of a doubt. But it is hard to compare the years. It's very hard to go back and say, you know, Steve Bruce wouldn't be a good centre-back now, or Gary Pallister wouldn't be a good centre-back now. It's difficult because I think they'd adjust to the time that they're playing in.
So, Phil, we haven't really got your opinion on this. You just sat there.
Well, I was sitting back listening.
He's been waiting to have his moment.
Yeah. No, to be honest, I agree with a lot of what everybody said, to be honest. I think my own personal view on a Rio Van Dijk debate is, again, it's a matter of opinion. I think if we're looking at the whole package in terms of what the players' skill sets are, what they've won, longevity, all that kind of thing, you'd probably say Rio probably pips Van Dijk in terms of that side of things. But I think in terms of, if I'm being brutally honest, and this is me just being brutally honest, if you asked me which centre-back I would not want to play against out of the two, I would say Van Dijk. I would rather play against Rio. Just purely based on, I think, what Keith said. I think Van Dijk has got everything as a centre-half. You know, he's not really got any weaknesses. But again, it's down to opinions, and I think them two are really good sort of pair to sort of have a chat about, because I think there's a lot of things that you can, you know, pros and cons for and against. But I think, obviously being at the club at the time when I was with Rio, and I seen how, you know, dedicated he was and all that kind of thing, I would just edge Rio in terms of the full package. But Van Dijk is an absolute phenomenon, and I think what he's done to Liverpool is incredible. As Keith said, and the lads, that he's transformed the club and made that back line what it is, really, for me, with the leadership he's got.
And I suppose, like, I know Reece made a valid point about not trying to compare different eras, but I think this next one has to be made because we're sticking with defence, lads. Irwin versus Andy Robbo.
These guards are going to someone's house there.
I'm about to say it.
They're coming for these comparisons.
He's in Dublin, so it's very possible.
We need to start with this one. Why I've not had a chat for a bit. I think Dennis Irwin and Robbo. I think Andy Robertson, for the money that Liverpool paid for him and what he's done and the way he's sort of progressed, is one of the buys of the Premier League era for me. I think what he's done and the sort of consistency and sort of the way he gets forward and his aggression, and I love all that, and the balls he puts into the box in the modern game has been fantastic. However, I think when you look at someone like Dennis Irwin, who played in the era that he did, he was versatile. He was never injured. He could take set pieces, penalties. What he's won, both internationals, obviously. But I think Irwin, for me, would just pip it, just in terms of, again, when we're talking about longevity, top level, a proper professional. Like, for me, I think, when I hear people speak about Dennis Irwin, I think, no one has a bad word to say about him. He was never, in the media for anything negative. And obviously, back in the day when people liked to drink as well, I know he was somebody who was very, very professional, and sort of was always there when needed. And I just think in that particular category, I think Dennis Irwin is gets the nod for me in that particular debate for me.
And even Reese makes the point in the chat here. Andy Robertson is probably the best developed centre back from his country. Scotland didn't have many great players, but we'll give him that one. Irwin had more to his game though, but I do agree, because while Robertson was great, is great at corners, you kind of have to look at the overall package that Irwin had to offer. He could play on the left, he could play on the right. He did corners, free kicks, penalties. There was a lot to this Irwin's game, really. So I suppose to bring in one Irishman to another, Keith, do you want to take up that one?
Yeah, yeah. Look, it's a close debate, this one, in my opinion. Whereas, and people get annoyed if I say the last one wasn't close. This one is close. I think Dennis Irwin probably. Okay, I'd concede Dennis Irwin on this because he was an excellent player. He done his stuff without any fuss. He scored a lot of goals throughout his career. Dennis Irwin went into Manchester United at a time when they needed the transformation, and he was part of that, and he done it quietly and effectively. He was a brilliant player. Andy Robertson is, to me, he's one of the best left backs in the Premier League here. I think he's the top assists for a defender. I think he beat Trent recently.
He's joined on.
Is he joined?
With 58 apiece.
Yeah, a ridiculous amount of numbers. Ridiculous numbers that the two of them lads do. And Robertson never gets the credit for it. It's always seen that Trent gets the assists when Robertson has been neck and neck with him all the way. And as Phil said, for 8 million in the modern sort of, and essentially it was free, because Liverpool sold Kevin Stewart the Hull the next day or so, one of them little swazzes to sort of balance the books on that. An outstanding signing for Liverpool, and still going strong. Longevity, okay, yeah, that can be a thing. Robertson's been at Liverpool a long time as well. And look, I think that's a close one. I'm willing to concede that Dennis Irwin could come out on top on that one. But, a close one. Robertson's brilliant. Robertson, I think, if Robertson stays at Liverpool for another few years and wins a few more trophies, I think he will be the best out of the two of them. But look, for now, I'm willing to concede that one, because there's not many more will be conceded. I'll lay us in on a few secrets now.
Do you know what, though, both of these, right? Both of them, if you look at both signings, they're both signings that weren't massive signings. Like Dennis Irwin comes from Oldham, though Robertson comes from Hull City. And you don't see, nowadays, if you look now, if you back a couple of years ago, you don't see many players come from Scotland and Ireland to two of the biggest clubs in England right now. Like back in the day, yeah, there was loads of Irish and Scottish players playing for both clubs. But right now you don't see it. And I think Irwin, Phil hit the nail on the head in terms of scoring goals, taking free kicks, corners, stuff like that. He's a fantastic left back. And look, even from he can attest to it as well, for a country as well. Go back in the 90s, he was solid for Ireland as well. It's actually, if you look at it, a player like that, it's a shame he didn't win an international trophy, or even go far to it in that regard. So look, he is a top left back. And I think with Robertson as well, he actually, the two Liverpool lads hit the nail on the head in terms of he probably doesn't get as much appreciation that Trent does, because Trent not only gets the assist, but his overall play is probably more easy on the eye, with his switches of play and his shooting and his free kicks and stuff like that. That's why probably Trent is probably more people's choice. But no, I think equally he's a consistent player. And
actually, you might be adding a question there to that, Keane. Do you think the comparison or the lack of recognition for Robertson, and I'm purely putting down this because of how young Trent Alexander-Arnold is it because he's that young and he still has the longevity compared to Robertson that he's getting?
Maybe as well, because Trent is an English international, so obviously same with us. If we've Kobbie Mainoo or someone doing that well and he's playing for club and country and he's an academy player, naturally you gravitate towards an academy player more, naturally, in that sense. But I do think Robertson is a good player, and I think one thing that you talk about drop-offs. When Van Dijk comes out, there's a drop-off, right? Obviously. When Robertson comes out, there's a bit of a drop-off as well, because Tim McCass is good going forward. He's good delivery on him. But the difference defensively between the two boys there Robertson is solid on both fronts. I do think like look, do think he's underrated. So yeah, look, I'd edge Irwin because like his overall goals and assists and stuff, and like all the other stuff he done. I think like he's done a lot of modern day stuff back in the day when it wasn't common for fullbacks to do that. Whereas now you look at Trent, Robertson, Walker, to all these other centre backs are doing. Sorry, right backs and left backs are doing all that now. But yeah, look, both are top, both are consistent, and both fly under the radar because, like, we're going to see now in the debate, these players get all the fucking plaudits.
Now, I was going to say before we move on to the final debate, Adam, do you want to mirror anything, or have you anything different to add?
I'll be honest. I think the boys have sort of covered it all. Like, I'll keep it short and sweet. I think again, like Keith, I probably have to fall on my sword on this one a little bit. I think Robertson probably at times in his career probably been considered the best left back in the world at that current point in time. But for me, again, like the bottom line is, if I'm looking at the Premier League, especially, Dennis Irwin probably falls second to probably only Ashley Cole in terms of best left backs in the Premier League. So yeah, for me, it's a close one, but I probably would just have to edge Irwin on that.
That's fair. And nice to see the Liverpool boys conceding that one. Now, here's the one where it's going to just be a full blowout, really. It's the age, and like, as I made the point going into Irwin and Robertson, it's not natural to compare the different eras, as Reece made the point, but this one is in the same era. The good old-fashioned Gerrard versus Scholes. Go on, we'll give this to Adam first to start this one.
Look, I've got to be honest. It has to be Gerrard for me. I think obviously, like I said, look, just growing up watching him carry that Liverpool team on his back for years, and I mentioned before about how sort of fans will naturally gravitate towards the Premier League title. How many Premier League titles you've won? Obviously, Gerrard's not got one, and they'll sort of go for that. But like at the end of the day, if you look at like individual honours, and again, this probably leads more towards Gerrard in the fact that he did have to sort of do more on his own. In that, PFA Premier League Team of the Year, like a record of 8 times. Like no other midfielders come close to that in the Premier League era. I think obviously he finished like 3rd place in the Ballon d'Or. I think like featured in the World 11 a few times. Like some of his individual honours, when you actually look at those, smash the likes of Paul Scholes out the park. And look, I'm not saying by any means Scholes was a bad player. Scholes was unbelievable. But I just think when you compare, the difference between what each of them could do. I mean, Gary Neville actually, I remember on the overlap, Neville was asking Scholes about Gerrard. And look, whether this is just Scholes being humble, I don't know. But Scholes said himself, Gerrard could have definitely done what I did in the Man United team, but could I have done what he did for Liverpool? I don't think so. And they were his words. He quite literally admitted he didn't think he could do what Gerrard had done. And I think as well, like, look, it's been mentioned numerous times before that Fergie wanted to sign Gerrard, and I think there might have been one time where it could have been close to happening. But at the end of the day, like the bottom line, I'm not saying that Gerrard would have come in and replaced Scholes, but Alex Ferguson wasn't trying to sign Gerrard to bench him. Like he was going to be playing, and literally, like if we're going to go into the Premier League title talk and all that sort of stuff, Gerrard moves to United, he wins 8 Premier League titles. For me, it's not about that. I just think the overall balance of the player, I have to take Gerrard on that one.
And like, it's interesting you make that point about let's say Scholes mentioning what he could have or what he could or couldn't have done in a Liverpool shirt. You kind of have to think opposite way around. If he did end up going on to sign Steven Gerrard, would Gerrard have had as much of an impact as people make? Like, because obviously he did a fantastic job at Liverpool, don't get me wrong, but you kind of have to question, would he have done as good of a job as he did as Liverpool in the United shirt? Like, yeah, sure, he would have won the Premier League titles, but would he have had as much of an impact in that Man United midfield as well? Phil, I'll come to you on that one. So, what do you make of Gerrard or Scholes?
Yeah, I think if I'm being brutally honest, I think if you look at all the attributes of both players, I think all round Gerrard's a better player in terms of all the aspects of a footballer. But for me, I think in terms of what Paul, obviously I was lucky enough to be at the club at the time when Paul Scholes was there, and I was lucky enough to play and train with him, and he is by far the best player that I have ever seen. You know, and I've been lucky enough to play with a lot of good players, Ronaldo, Rooney, you know, and Paul Scholes was head and shoulders above anyone else I've ever seen. And I think, you know, we can look at, you know, again, we talk about the whole package in terms of honours and what Scholes has won. That has a big part in it for me. I think, you know, as a player, you're based on your success, how you've done in your career. And I think for me, Scholes was a massive, massive, massive part of why Manchester United was so successful, and he did it for a long period of time. Not to take anything away from Steven Gerrard, because I think, you know, Liverpool at that period were struggling, and he was doing his utmost to sort of, you know, do what he could do and get them to sort of, you know, the levels that he was striving to. But for me, I just have to stick with Paul Scholes on this one. I think the debate, you can argue for both players. You can sit here till the cows come home and say, you know, he's got this and he's got that. You know, in a nutshell, both players are you know, two of the best English midfielders that we've ever seen. And there won't be many that are sort of anywhere near them two for me, even in, you know, 15, 20, 30 years time. Them two will still be talked about because of the impact that they both had on the clubs.
You mentioned there the two of them were like the greatest, obviously, like English midfielders at this present time. Do you think if Jude Bellingham keeps going at Real Madrid the way he's going, do you think he'd be in that conversation?
Massively.
Yeah. I think he's another player who's got the attributes that we're talking about here. He's a bit like a Gerrard, and he scores, obviously, for Real Madrid. Since he's gone there, he's scoring, you know, a ridiculous amount of goals for a sort of a midfield number 8 type player. So, you know, if he carries on and starts to add some, you know, silverware to his sort of resume as well, then, you know, he's going to be definitely somebody who we're looking at in that bracket, along with, you know, your Lampards and people like that. So, yeah. But if I'm having to choose, I think, you know, for me, again, I've got that sort of loyalty as well, and I've played with Scholes. I think, you know, he just about edges it for me. But again, that's to take nothing away from Gerrard. I think he's an absolutely, you know, fantastic player.
And actually, I have to ask this, Phil, because you've made the point that you've played with Scholes and you've seen him up close. Are those stories about him in training true, about how accurate his passes actually are, really?
Yeah, I honestly, mate, I mean, I've played football and I've played at every level you can play. And Paul Scholes is just an absolute ridiculous player. Like, they used to call him Sat-Nav. He was that good because he could just literally put a ball on a sixpence from any position. Possession drills, you just couldn't get near him. His vision, he sort of just ran the training sessions. And I've never, ever seen anyone like it from the moment I trained with him to sort of, you know, present day that's been anywhere near him. And I think what speaks volumes, just quickly on Paul Scholes, is as well, you know, when you look at all the other top midfielders in world football, your Zidanes, your Xavis, your Iniestas, they all say, you know, Paul Scholes was somebody who they idolised and sort of had the utmost respect for because of the way he played the game, his vision and his passing, and the way he was sort of 3 or 4 steps ahead was what separated him from me in terms of, you know, how he just used to run the game and pick them passes that got us, you know, into the final third and basically, you know, in on goal.
Massive, man, absolutely massive. Keith, I'll come to you on that one because I don't know, like, even though I have still got yourself and Keane to come to, I don't know how much more there is to say really about the two boys.
Well, look, I heard everything Phil has said, and I think there's an awful lot of weight to the fact that Phil trained day in, day out with this fella, and you see what they do on the training ground, and there's a lot to be said for that. One thing I would say, right, because I'm clearly going to pick Gerrard over Scholes, and it's a simple point that I made with Van Dijk and Rio. I think Scholes is the best all-round midfielder. Gerrard is the best all-round midfielder in England
we haven't.
they've ever
We
had.
haven't.
But I think Gerrard's the best all-round midfielder in the sense that I think what Scholes' main attribute was his passing, right? I think Gerrard is as good a passer as Scholes, maybe a bit less, but up there. Let's say one's a 10, the other one's a 9.8, right? I think Gerrard is better at every other facet of the game as an individual player, right? So I think he's a better tackler. Well, he's a better tackler, obviously, but I think he's a better striker of the ball. I think he's a better engine, a better defensive player. I think just as an all-round midfielder, I think Steven Gerrard is. I think he's usually underrated actually for his ability as an all-round midfielder. I think he has, he's as good as any midfielder. If you want to compare him to Roy Keane for tackling, I think he's as good as Roy Keane at tackling. If you want to compare him to Frank Lampard for scoring goals, I think he's as good as Frank Lampard at scoring goals. Now, this comes across as being biased because you're a Liverpool fan. I genuinely just think he's very underrated. And one thing Phil said there as well was, you take a player's career and the things they won. And there's a lot to be said for that. But there's also, something that he touched on was Gerrard wasn't in good Liverpool teams. And Scholes was in, as he was part of developing the best team in the 1990s and into the 2000s. I think it's harsh to hold it against Gerrard, that he didn't have the Premier League wins. He's, Champions League final. He drags Liverpool over the line in that FA Cup final against West Ham. He drags Liverpool over the line in that. He's dragged Liverpool so many times. Just didn't get over the line in that Premier League. And everyone knows, look, he slips on his arse against Chelsea when he had a chance of winning it. Everyone has a good chuckle at that. It's actually very sad that that happened. If you take your people in the chat will say, I'm biased and blinkers. If you were a neutral, which none of us are on this, by the way, if you were a neutral and I suppose nobody's really neutral when it comes to Liverpool, but look, if you take your blinkers off and you say, well, that's it, it's big teams. People don't like the big teams, but it's, it's sad that a player of that quality, of that absolute pinnacle of midfield play, when he did have his chance of doing it, it was him that let him down. You know what I mean? It's quite, I think personally, I think it's quite sad. Look, Liverpool have won the league since then. So I don't really give a shit that Steven Gerrard didn't win a league title. Do you know what I mean? I'm glad Liverpool got over the line and we stopped that course, that rot of 30 years. So whether it was Gerrard or not, I couldn't care less. But I just think it's been, I think it's a bit sad that gets held against him. But look, as a player, I think it's a no-brainer. I think Gerrard's much better than Scholes. But I do take Phil's point that he watched them in training, and I think, I'm not giving Scholes the credit he probably deserves. At the same way, I think maybe Gerrard won't get the credit he deserves as well. They're both excellent players. I think they're both the best midfielders since Paul Gascoigne. I think Jude Bellingham would have to go a long way to be better than them, to be honest. But look, it's...
Keith, just to jump in on that as well, I have got friends, obviously, who played for Liverpool at the time, and to be honest, obviously everything I've said about Scholes, they have basically reciprocated with Gerrard. So, obviously I can only go off what I was seeing and what I obviously was doing.
But that's 100%. That's you've been on the train and you've been in the trenches with this fella. You know what I mean? So I think there's a lot to be said for that, and I think we're looking at it from the armchair conveniently enough, whereas you've been on the pitch with them and Paul Scholes, from everything you hear, absolutely outrageous footballer, talent. Maybe, I don't know if it was a personality thing for him, he was too quiet or whatever, but look, who knows if Gerrard goes into that United team and can make an impact. I think he could personally, but, who knows whether it be Scholes that falls the victim. I mean, they bring in Varane and it's a headache.
And we know what happened there.
Varane was a great player, a brilliant player. Juan Varane was an absolutely outstanding footballer before he went to Man United. And look, it didn't work out for him, but it was trying to shoehorn him in. Would that have happened with Gerrard as well? Who knows?
And you could have played a 4-3-3, Keane sitting, then Scholes and Gerrard as eights. Fuck me.
It's scary to think of, but to finish off this debate with yourself, Keane, I'm actually going to bring Reese's comment back up because I want you to start with this. One thing that both men have elements of is that they come alive in the big games and they excel at them, and obviously I'll let you start on that point and then fall into who you prefer of the two.
Look, I'm going to keep this short because we've more to get through. But both came alive in big games. Gerrard in the FA Cup final. Scholes also scored in the FA Cup final. Scholes scored that's not the Champions League final goal, but he got us to the final against Barcelona at Old Trafford. And both had decorated careers. And one thing I love about Paul Scholes' story is that he went into retirement. He came out of retirement to 50 quid boots and won the league again. Like that's a story I just loved. For he fucking needed him. Probably shouldn't have retired when he did, but look, both great midfielders. And I think the one thing you'd say, everyone talks about prime Barclays Premier League, and you talk about prime midfielders and prime strikers. Like these two boys are right up there. I do think look, there's not much more I can say than the lads have already said. I'm obviously going to pick my man Paul Scholes, but yeah, look, you just have to have admiration for both of them for what they've achieved in the game.
And we move on to our final our conclusion of the evening, and it's the biggest twist of them all, in my opinion. So for this segment, we have a final twist. The two Liverpool lads have been tasked with picking their all-time United 11, and Keane and Phil were given the poor misfortune, shall we say, of making an all-time Liverpool 11. Now, in fairness, I've seen what the boys have come up with for their Liverpool 11s, and it's not a million miles off what I would pick myself, but at the same time, we'll leave this down to you. So, Keane, Phil, take it away.
Phil, we agreed on this in the chat. Now, to be fair, Phil's lineup was more spot on than mine, so I'm going to bring up that's the wrong one. I'm going to bring up the lineup that we agreed on. So we went with Alisson Becker in goal, Trent Alexander-Arnold right back, Virgil van Dijk and Sammy Hupia the two centre halves. Yeah, you might kill me over that one. I knew there's a couple you might kill us over. Sammy Hupia centre half, Andy Robertson left back. Then we went to midfield three of Steven Gerrard, Xabi Alonso, and John Barnes. And then the front three, we went with Mo Salah, Luis Suarez, and Robbie Fowler.
Now, before Adam and Keith taking I had my own say of what could have been added there. You had your option of Torres, you had your option of Suarez, and then Dalglish. You had so many different options.
I might be my one, but yeah.
Yeah, I think the centre forward for Liverpool is probably the most difficult in terms of we tried to go 3 because there's been that many good striking options over the years. I said obviously Dalglish was probably just before my time, so I understand and I know how much he means to Liverpool. So he could have quite easily gone in there. Ian Rush, we've not even mentioned Ian Rush.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Yeah.
So Torres doesn't get in, Michael Owen. But for me, I think because I was obviously when I was growing up and as a young kid, Robbie Fowler was the man. And what I used to love about Robbie Fowler was he was a pure finisher, left foot, right foot, headed goals. And I remember obviously, vivid memories of him and the way he used to sort of take a lot of the goals, and then what Suarez did and obviously Salah for me speaks for himself with what he's done. So I think that was the front three I sort of went for just purely based off my experiences really.
And that comment there was the exact reason why I went for Suarez myself personally over Torres, even though I kind of tried shoehorning Torres in there at one point in the chat. But I kind of said like Suarez had a bit more, but Torres when he was at Liverpool was just for me. I feared seeing Torres on that team sheet, so that's probably why I tried shoehorning him in because yeah, fair enough. He gave Villarreal one game of terror, but like. Just watching it because obviously having the Liverpool games down at home with my brother, watching Liverpool and watching Torres just be so clinical, and then you see Suarez be just as clinical, if not better. It was just amazing, really. Adam, Keith, have you any debates as to the boys starting 11?
Can I just ask you, what's that front three position wise? We're going with obviously Salah wide right, Suarez centre and Robbie Fowler to the left.
Well, probably move Suarez out wide left and put Fowler through the middle.
What about getting away from 4-3-3 and just going to 4-4-2 and then just putting John Barnes on the left wing where he was actually brilliant rather than centre mid at the end of his career and go Salah right, John Barnes left, Suarez, Fowler. Probably couldn't argue too much about the picks themselves. Like Sammy Hupia for me is a player that was very underrated. Look, as a Liverpool fan, it depends on where your scope is. You're only going for players you've seen. Look, I've seen Alan Hansen. I'd have Alan Hansen in there, but that's just me. I wouldn't argue with any of the picks. I'd probably, shoehorn them maybe into a 4-4-2 would be a better fit for the players there. But yeah, good choices. You know, it's all about opinions, you know, and Robbie Fowler is a great player.
When I was doing my 11, obviously I went my lifetime. I had Michael Owen in there because back in the day, like before his injuries and before he went to Real Madrid, he was outrageous. Like, and he won the Ballon d'Or as well. I thought about that from that perspective when Liverpool won the UEFA Cup, League Cup, and the FA Cup in that season, and he won the Ballon d'Or. Like, Michael Owen was outrageous. So, like, I felt hard done by not putting him in because watching him growing up, he was really good. Before obviously he had injuries and then moved to Real Madrid and obviously then moved to Newcastle, and funnily enough came to us as well. And he was decent for a spell at us. But yeah, obviously when you look at Luis Suarez and Salah, like you're not putting them in ahead of them. Like,
no.
Would any of you lads have had Steve McManaman possibly? Because he was another one who I was sort of flirting around with. But I think when you compare with sort of Salah or someone else, it's maybe.
I think he's definitely an option. I think it was sort of touched upon before. I think Liverpool in particular, that forward area, there's just been so many potential greats that it is almost like, just sort of have your pick of the bunch and sort of any which three. I think for me, as long as Salah's in there, the other two spots could be filled up by essentially any of the names we've just mentioned, and I wouldn't have had an issue with it.
That's a fair point to make.
I think they are just brilliant in their own right.
Because Suarez is probably the best forward that's played for Liverpool. Yeah, Mane didn't get a mention.
Mane as well. Do you know what I mean? Like what he's done, and again, he was a player who's come from Southampton and probably wasn't expected to do what he's done, and that front three was.
But even I was saying to myself that if one for Salah, McManaman would probably just be slotted right into that right mid role or right wing role, depending on what formation you play, really, because like as Reece made the point in the comment, he was quality for Real Madrid, but at the same time he had his own qualities as well, that he was of a certain level that he was able to play.
Fergie back in the day was in the 90s when McManaman was playing for Liverpool. I remember seeing the video when they're doing the analysis before the Liverpool game, and Fergie's like, you need to stop him before the game. Yeah. So he was the top player for Liverpool.
I think on his day he was the best player, but he was too inconsistent maybe. I think Steve McManaman, when he went to Real Madrid and he's winning European Cups, he became a better player. And I just don't think he gets the credit from even Liverpool fans, to be honest, for his Liverpool time. I thought he was brilliant.
But like that comment just says, no, he literally had two defenders put on for the FA Cup final. If that's not the sign of a good quality player, I don't know what is. So if you want to pick amongst yourselves as to, have you got two different?
No, we went to Phil's lineup. We went to Phil's lineup because I had a bit of a stinker with two players.
No, I'm talking to the two Liverpool boys. Sorry, did you, Adam and Keith? Did you have two different lineups, or have you agreed on one?
No. Well, I just have a lineup, and I'm sure Adam has his own lineup. And it's funny, somebody just in the chat there gave a lineup which was nearly identical to mine.
That would be really.
Don't bring it up. It's for spoiler alerts.
Our resident shithouse.
The weekly steel chair, that one. Yeah, like I've literally gone with this team, but I haven't got Ronaldo in it. I have Giggs, and I went with 4-4-2. And the reason I done that, it's not really. There was a thing we were looking at on the agenda as well, was the Premier League Ronaldo versus Salah thing. I think Ronaldo, when he left United, and he was excellent at United, but I think when he left United, he went to a different stratosphere. I just think Giggs' longevity, I done it by Van der Sar, and people will disagree probably. I'm surprised even that you went with that. And I don't know if Adam went with Peter Schmeichel or whatever. I think Van der Sar was just consistent. I think Peter Schmeichel was brilliant and erratic as well. And, I think give me a goalkeeper that's a steady, does all the good stuff, but he doesn't really make a balls of it. That's why the only reason I'd gone for Van der Sar. Gary Neville, Stam, Rio and Erwin I went with at the back. Again, I think they all speak for themselves. I think the midfield, the treble winning, well, not the actual night of the European Cup final, but the treble winning midfield, I think is brilliant. And something that was touched on earlier was around the Liverpool front three of Firmino, Mane and Salah being similar to the Tevez, Ronaldo, Rooney thing. I say all the time, I think that United team 08 or the 07-08 Manchester United team is probably their best team in the Premier League era. And similar to Liverpool, they'd done it with a front three like that, a solid back four, and then a midfield of jobbers. You know, Man United back then had Park, and they had, I can't even remember the lads that were playing.
Hargreaves
Oh,
was cool.
Carrick and
Hargreaves, you know, it wasn't the engine room, it wasn't the main part of the team. Whereas if you look at the 99 team, the midfield was, you know,
Massive,
if you were beating that midfield, you were having to walk your socks off to do that, you know. And I just felt that midfield is probably the best balance. And then up front, I went with Van Nistelrooy and Rooney as well. I just think Van Nistelrooy as a finisher was just, I hated him. I absolutely hated him. You'd watch him and he just scored everything. He was a ridiculous forward. He was brilliant. And I think Wayne Rooney, you know, I was going to say the Salah-Ronaldo comparison. I'd be looking at Salah-Rooney. I think Rooney's the best forward Manchester United have had. I think he's absolutely brilliant, Wayne Rooney. And
I think that Ronaldo and Salah, just to touch on it slightly, I think the only reason that a debate is made more than, let's say, making a debate of Salah and Rooney is because of the fact that two wide players, really.
Yeah.
And each their own, really, on that one.
Exactly.
But Adam, have you anything different to Keith?
Slightly different. Slightly not the back four exactly the same. I did go Schmeichel over Van der Sar. Like I said in the chat before, though, I had this team checked over by Rio, and he said it was golden. So if I get any backlash, it's on him, not me. I went with a midfield three of Keane, Scholes, and I actually had Bobby Charlton just ahead of them. Someone who's just not been mentioned yet.
One, yeah.
And then I was so close to going with a front three. Well, that front three of Ronaldo, Tevez, Rooney, just because of how devastating it was. I last second swapped out Tevez for Cantona just because I think for me, and I'm thinking about like the way, again, I mentioned earlier on in the show that my dad's a Man United fan. I think a lot of his sort of fanness, if that's a word, came from Cantona and his love for Cantona, and so you would always bang on about Cantona and sort of drill into my head about Cantona. So I've sort of grown up around that sort of idea of him, and granted he's a little bit before my time. I not really watched him too much of him play, but yeah, for me, I can't not put him in that team.
And just for straight interest, lads, my team was relatively similar to, like, even I was kind of talking about with lads as to how to shape the team. The only one I could really change for Liverpool, personally, if you wanted to make the contention, was, as I made the point there about your forward line, you could have anyone because of how devastating your forward line was at once upon a time. And then the only other change I would have potentially made was, who did I say again? Was it Risa over Robertson? But that was just because.
No,
I suppose Cold Heroes, Streets Never Forget kind of shenanigans bringing in Risa there, because like you think Risa, you hear in the back of your mind the release the Kraken commentary line as that free kick went, and I was there like, it's just one of those things like of a kind of cult. I won't say Risa's just only a cult hero because, okay, I didn't watch Liverpool as closely, obviously being only a young lad myself at the time. But was Risa that influential as a left back, or was he just a dead ball merchant, as what we would call it?
Risa was fast and he was strong. He was big and powerful, and he had a strike. But he was, I'd have another free kick left back ahead of him that scored against you a lot. And Aurelio, thought Fabio Aurelio was a brilliant left back, and he just injuries with him. You know, it never really happened for him. But you know, look, again, this is all about opinions. You know, Adam threw Bobby Charlton in there. I steered away from any of the older players, you know. But you could have had George Best in there. You know, I'm debating about Ronaldo and Giggs. The reality is, I put George Best in ahead of the two of them. Do you know what I mean? But
yeah,
it's just one of them. It's. I think it's great that you should always respect and honour your history for big clubs, you know. And I think Liverpool and Manchester United are lucky that they have that history. You know, they've got players that you could pick from 50, 60 years ago, 30, 40 years ago. And you know, if you done that and you took the historian's view of it and you picked a team that had, you know, Bobby Charlton and George Best and Dennis Law, and you had a Liverpool team with Graham Souness, and you had Kenny Dalglish, or you had, you know, other great players that Liverpool would have had down the years. Be very interesting. It's hard, but again, to compare the years, you know what I mean?
Course.
Like, where does Nobby Styles play? You know what I mean? In a current setup of a 4-3-3.
It's mad that like if you look at it, like Souness didn't get a mention in teams. Brian Robson didn't get a mention in the Man United teams, and he was captain. Marvel.
Forget him, yeah.
Like, do you know, like even Yap Stam as well. I know
only 3 or 4 years at the club, but the influence he had, like,
his impact was brilliant. Like, look, I think they're like when you look at both clubs, you do all-time 11s. There's never a correct one. It's always 100% subjective.
100%.
You know, whereas if you pick the Man City at all-time 11 now, you get based off what since from 2008 till now. It'd be quite easy, I'd say, to do it. Like, do you know?
Well, didn't they have a thing with that top goal scorers of all time? Phil Foden broke into their top 10 goal scorers of all time recently, and Dennis Stewart.
That's the problem. Like,
Dennis Stewart was in the top 10, and I think the rest of them were all from the last 10 or 15 years. You know, and look, it's a cheap dig to have at Manchester City, but they don't have history. They don't have history. They don't have that tradition that Liverpool and Man United have. And look, it's one of them things. It's the Busby Babes back in the late 50s into the 60s, and then they're winning European Cups, and then Liverpool are winning European Cups, and that's royalty, you know, that's football royalty, and it gets built over the years, and fan bases are built, and stories are being told to children in Ireland and further apart, further beyond, and that's how the reputation of these clubs is built. It's not built on pumping loads of money in and buying titles and buying fame. You know, look, Manchester City, the players on the pitch didn't cheat, but the reason the players are on the pitch is because the club cheated. So it's really difficult to sort of to slate the team itself. It's more how they got there. But our two teams got there because they built and built and built. And I'd throw Arsenal into the mix in that to a lesser extent, nowhere near, to be honest. But they're the next ones that done that. They had success over the years. Arsenal were winning leagues in the 20s and 30s or whatever, you know, when they were building up the big teams back then. I just think it's important that you build your club sort of organically, and that's how the success comes. And you see, like, Newcastle fans chipping up now about, how you can you compete? And look, your mate Gary Neville is chief among this as well, because he has a vested interest in all this sort of stuff. But I think when you have clubs that win and they create excellence, and Phil, you played in Manchester United in what the early to mid 2000s, was it? You were around the first team there. There's a culture of excellence. You know what I mean? It's not there now. Let's be honest. It's not at Manchester United now. But back then, I'd say the standards were so high and the expectations were through the roof that if you dropped that, you weren't getting near. You weren't training with that first team if you didn't meet them expectations. And I think that was, you know, that's a cultural thing that's built up over the years.
Yeah,
massively, yeah. So look, I think that's the perfect way to end it, because as we mentioned at the start, the rich history of the rivalry and the respect that both the clubs have for each other. And I think that's the main foundation of why we're all five of us are here today, to talk about rich history, rich culture, rich rivalry, and respect, and not be a buying success. So at this point, I think we look at the time and we say farewell. Lads, quick prediction for tomorrow, or for Sunday even, my apologies.
I'm not as confident as what I usually am. I think I'm not entirely sure how much we're going to rotate. Hopefully not too much, with it being sort of international break on the horizon. So I'm going to say we nick it 2-1.
Okay, Phil.
I'm going to say 2-1, but I'm going to say 2-1 to United. I don't know why, but it's got to be optimistic.
You have to, yeah.
Yeah.
One. I can see there's a confidence spoil on Keith's face. So go on, give us your prediction.
Now look, I don't mean this, right? It's going to sound so disrespectful, right? I don't think Manchester United are a good team at the moment, right? I don't think you are in the space where you were a few years ago. I think there's a bad vibe in that squad. I don't think Erik ten Hag has a system that he plays other than sort of counter attack. But I think Liverpool will. I don't think it's going to be easy for Liverpool. Put it that way. We beat you 7-0 last season, and then we thought, right, we're going to roll into this season, and we couldn't break us down. I think he will park a bus even at home, look to hear us on the break, but I think Liverpool will win 2-0.
And Keane, do reflect what Keith was after saying there, because like you kind of go back to that game at Anfield back in December, and you kind of have to think going on how our team is performing and some of the injuries. Now, fair enough, we know that some players are due back, but even with some of the injuries we have in place, you kind of have to set up defensively in this scenario, even at home.
Yeah, look, I do think we need to be like the last thing I want to see is us going with the high press, low block system that he's been doing the last couple of weeks, like letting the players press up. If you do that against Liverpool, you're going to get slaughtered. It's simple as that. So I do expect, like he said, that United will be a lot more compact. I think the return of Rasmus Højlund is massive for us, like in terms of him being able to hold up the ball and hopefully be able to bring other players into play on the break. I think that could be huge. I never go United loss. I'll go, I seen the comments, 1-0 win. I'll go 1-0 win with Bruno Fernandes penalty. Something controversial.
Is Højlund back for it? Yeah, Højlund's back for
it.
Yeah,
Hag said today he's back, yeah.
So if they decide to let Højlund start from the start, we might get a different game. We might get a different setup. But I think it'll be a low-scoring game. It'll be 1-0. I'm actually not even going to say to who, because genuinely, because United will probably set up defensively, go on the counter. After that, it's anyone's guess, really. Nunes hat-trick. Come on.
I'll put my head. Oh my God! If that happens on Sunday, because he'll be hopping off me as well if that happens.
He's on fire at the minute. To be fair, he's on fire.
Yeah. It's funny. Do you still see Nunes as a joke figure?
No, I wouldn't, because even towards the end of last year, and you can go back to the shows we had on here last year. I think like he was obviously a rough, a rough
misses a lot of easy chances.
Do you know what I mean? Like Højlund was doing the same at the start of the season, missing the easy ones, and then banging in the hard ones in the Champions League. Like I do think, like if you look at both of them lads, they're both like young fellas, and I do think their game probably still needs a bit of work, but I do think with Darwin Nunes specifically, his work rate on and off the ball is really good, and he gets himself in good positions. And eventually, when you get yourself in them positions, that Phil probably will be more qualified to say than me. Like when you get yourself in them positions enough times, you're going to score. So, like, I do think from that perspective, I do think Nunes has improved in that department this year, and I do think he can only get better.
He's definitely got all the attributes to be a top centre forward. I think he just needs to be a little bit more clinical and sort of in that final third, be a bit more composure, a bit more sort of, I think sometimes he's sort of, when he's running through, he's not one of them strikers where you're confident he's going to put the ball in the back of the net. I think you've got a bit of a doubt in your mind, but he's definitely someone who, if he does sort of book his ideas up in front of goal, he's going to be a very good player, because he's very athletic, he's rapid, he's got the build, physique, he's good in the air. So just that final finishing touches, and he could be a real handful.
He terrorizes the centre backs, doesn't he? Whoever he's playing against, he absolutely gives them a nightmare. And if you get other players in around that,
you wouldn't want to be playing against him, because he's, as you say, South American. They're all the same. They're nuisances.
Yeah, he's quick, he's big, he's strong. Like going through one-on-one, he's either going to miss, as he has done. We've seen him going around the keeper and missing, or he's going to dinker over like he did against Brentford a few weeks ago, when you're like, he's going to miss, and he just lobbed the keeper when he's about 5 yards away from him. Like, he's so unpredictable. I think he could be the difference. The reason I brought him up, I think he could be the difference on Sunday. I think if Nunes is firing, I think Liverpool will win. Yeah. Again, that's my bias, as Trevor keeps saying. I'm very biased.
Hey, Trevor winds me up, and he's here every week, so I wouldn't take any offense to what he says.
I don't know. Trevor was assuming I'd come here picking the United win. I don't know what's going on here, but no, Liverpool win. Nunes to score. Happy days.
But look, we'll wrap it up there, lads. Adam, Keith, it's actually been an absolute blast. I gave you a stick at the start just for being Liverpool fans, but it's been an absolute fucking blast to have you on, lads.
Yeah. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, look, we have to give the stick as we can. Keane, Phil, always a pleasure to have you on, guys.
Yeah, no, great to come on and have a chat. As I say, I always love a chat about football in general. I've got respect for all fan bases, all fans. There's no, bad blood from my part, and it was great to talk to. So yeah, enjoyed it.
And on that note, we'll say good night, lads. Thanks very much for everyone for listening and commenting and getting involved. And until Sunday, we'll see you then.